In a surprising turn of events, French President Emmanuel Macron has sparked heated discussions about France's historical role in Africa, particularly in the Sahel region. During a recent address, President Macron expressed his frustration over what he perceives as a lack of gratitude from African nations for France's long-standing involvement and support in the region. The statement comes at a time when we are witnessing a significant shift in the dynamics between France and its former colonies. Increasingly, African countries are asserting their independence and pushing back against foreign influence, questioning the legacy of colonialism and effectiveness of foreign aid. Now, joining us live from Johannesburg, South Africa, to discuss this further is international relations analyst Vhahangwele Tsotetsi. A warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us on the news.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your audience.
Now, Mr. Tsotetsi, what factors do you think might have contributed to President Macron's assertion that Africa is not grateful for France's support, particularly in the Sahel region? What was your initial reaction when you saw this? Other analysts have said, this is downright disrespectful.
Of course, I mean, I do agree with other analysts. And what's happening is that, we're seeing a disrespect, to the African continent, especially, the Sahel region, from President Macron, saying that, the French colonies are actually, ungrateful for what France has done in the region, and especially, from you'd say 2013, with Operation, Bakane and Operation Sahel. So my initial reaction was that, I've always knew that, President Emmanuel Macron is that, there's just that sense of entitlement, to African nations, especially the French colonies. And you'd remember also in 2019 when President Emmanuel Macron said something about, to tackle poverty, African women should actually, reduce
Yes.
giving back. So I really, find it very disrespectful, and hence we're seeing the pushback, from a number of African countries, countries like Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad. So I think, that is where we're seeing the pushback, and also the assertion from the French president that, African countries are actually, ungrateful. I think also, it's because of, it actually emanates, from what France, has been doing for the Sahel region. And also, most importantly, we have to highlight that, since, France has been having direct military control in these countries, we haven't seen any, reduced, conflicts in these areas, which just defeats the purpose.
Like you rightly said, there's been a lot of pushback from the governments in this former French colonies in West Africa. And I'm just wondering what exactly Macron expects Africans to be grateful for colonialism or Bakane and Sahel that were not successful militarily. Now, how do you interpret the increasing pushback from African countries against French influence, and what are the underlying causes of this change? We're slowly moving away from the days of France-Afrique.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing right now is that, like I've mentioned, that, so the whole aim of the French military, its presence in its former colonies, especially in the Sahel region, is to counter terrorism. Where we saw in 2013, with Operation Sahel and Operation Bakane, in countries like Mali, in countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and so forth. So, I mean, if you look in terms of like currently, those conflicts, they have increased, in numbers, and and it just goes back, to why, thinking about what is really, the aim of the French, in presence, in these countries. And to be honest with you, I mean, I agree, with the sentiment that, it's a whole part of the neo-colonial strategy from France, to assert its influence in these former colonies. Because, I mean, if you're looking back in history, France actually colonized much of West and Central Africa, and these countries, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and so forth, they've been part of the French Empire until the mid 20th century. So now, after the loss of control of France in these areas, France continued actually post-colonial independence. France continued to assert, its influence in these countries through the CFA, France currency, and also cultural ties.
Now, Vhahangwele, quite contrary, I think it's the French that should be thankful to its former African colonies, because to quote former French President Jacques Chirac, he acknowledged that without Africa, France will slide down the ranks into the ranks of a third world power. Now, given the current dynamics, what approaches do you suggest France should consider in building relations with African nations and foster mutual respect and cooperation? Because we've seen a huge anti-French sentiment across the continent, especially in the West African sub-region.
I think, it's very important that, a lot of, there is a rise in nationalism and a rise in Pan-Africanism. And what France, should do going forward is that, it has to move away from bilateral aid or bilateral engagements and move into multilateral, engagements through the AU, the African Union, and ECOWAS. So in that way, they know that, they can actually engage, with these various institutions and just build trust and lessen the whole notion of neo-colonialism. And also, France should do away with direct military rule and just resort to soft power, in things like investing in things like education, language training, and so forth. I think, in that way, that is a way to build relations and also just, remove the notion of neo-colonialism, because now African countries, they're actually, trying to move away, from reliance, from their colonial powers and moving into the more self-reliance. And also, as it's stipulated in the African Union 2063 agenda, that, African countries should actually, seek, a framework and move away from their colonial powers.
For your insight, as always, Vhahangwele Tsotetsi. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.